Hi, this is Rabbi Tzvi Mandel of Congregation Kal B'nai Yisrael, community of Jewish friends. Welcome back. Have been here for a long time. And so we'll speak about a couple of beautiful stories about Eden. First story is about the great Rabbunim. There was a man who had a hotel by the name of Rabbunim, big Baal Tzedakah, gave a lot of charity. And once a chassid of Reb David Kotzka came to him while he was traveling to his Rebbe. In fact, he used to come to him always when he had to travel to his Rebbe. And he stayed at his place, and he heard him krechts, he heard him sigh, and he says to him, why is a Jew krechzen, especially a chassid? It's supposed to be joyous. Hashem loves us so much and takes care of us. And we have the three loves of the Baal Shem Tov, Ahavas Hashem, Ahavas Torah, Ahavas Yisrael, loving our fellow Yidden, loving the Holy Torah, loving Hashem. There's nothing bit. Why krechts? And he puts his eyes down to the floor and he says, yes, it's true, but when you have 4 older girls at home that are not married, and no one reads any shidduchim, no one even offers any matches because I'm broke, barely have to live from. So that's when one krechts, even though we know that Hashem loves us so much. So Rabbunim said, wait here, I'll be right back. Comes back with a big box of money and asks him, how much does it take to marry your 4 daughters? And he thinks to himself and he says, it's about $500 per, which includes the wedding, plus some nice clothes, plus rent for the first couple of months. And Rabbunim takes out $2,000 and gives it to him. He couldn't believe it. And he thanks him profusely. And he was very happy. And then he says to himself, you know what? I never took money from people. And as hard as it was, I always tried to avoid taking charity money. Why should I fall for this? Maybe this is a test from heaven. And so he says to Rabbunim, you're a wonderful person. I love your hotel. You do so many mitzvahs. But I can't take such a big amount of money from you. In fact, I don't want to take anything from you. I was just krechten, and that's my business. It's between me and God. But why should I have to take so much money from you? I'll tell you what. Since you're such a wonderful person, I know you're giving it with your full heart. I'll take the money, but I want you to write out a transaction and sign it that this is only a loan, and when I prosper and I'm able to, I'll pay you back the full amount, and you'll have to take the money. Rabbunim, seeing what a special person this Kotzka Chassid was, and he saw he wasn't going to get away without it, he said, okay. And he wrote out a loan transaction and signed it, that at the right time he has to pay me back, and I'll take the money, and everybody's happy. Years go by, and Rabbunim, the hotel owner, passes away, and his son, Rabbi Yitzchak, takes over the business. But Rabbi Yitzchak wasn't much of a businessman. He was a huge Torah scholar, Talmid Chacham, and a Chassidic Yid, very humble and joyous always. And he had to support a family, but he was more immersed in studying than in business. So the business wasn't going so great. And one day when he did go traveling to do some business, he would take along his a lot of money so he could do the business. Plus he took along his Shabbos clothes just in case he'll be stuck in the town that he's going to, plus his tefillin, of course, and plus, of course, his books, his farm, so that he shouldn't waste any time. And he goes on the train, and he had to travel far away to do this business that he had to do. Well, the train stopped in a certain city far away, and sadly enough, a bunch of robbers came on the train. Since there was no one on the train because everybody was outside, they robbed everything, including everything that he owned, including his books, and of course his kish and his streimel and his talis and film. Zilch, he had nothing left. There were a couple of Yidden around, and they saw his situation. They said, "Don't worry, we'll take care of you." And they got together a little money over there. They went into the city and gave him a certain amount of money, and they bought him a new pair of tefillin and a new streimel and maybe some clothes. And he goes home. And here it is before Yantif, before Purim, before Pesach. And of course, Passover, Pesach, the most expensive holiday of the year. And Rabbi Yitzchak's trying to think, what am I supposed to do now? And while he's thinking, all of a sudden the mailman comes with a letter from Bialystok. He thinks to himself, who do I know in Bialystok? He opens the letter. And in the letter there was a check for 2,000 rubles. And the letter read as follows. My name is so-and-so. Many decades ago, I had the honor and the privilege of knowing your special Holy Father. And I've heard they passed on, and I've heard that you're more into studying Torah than doing business, but that's none of my business. I sent along a copy of your father's transaction to me that at the right time, when I'll be able to afford it, I should give back 2,000 rubles to him that he was kindly enough to lend to me. And all these years, I was not a rich man. And I'm already an elderly man, and I would have came to your city to give back the 2,000 rubles. But since it's hard for me to travel now, I happened to have bought a lottery ticket last week, and I won 5,000 rubles. So here's the 2,000 rubles. That's yours. It's not charity. And you see the letter that your father wrote out, and have a joyous Yantif. And he couldn't believe it, because here he was ready to sell his wife's jewelry to have money for Yantif. There was nothing to eat. The children were starving, and here the holidays are coming. And sure enough, they had a beautiful Yantif. And right after Pesach, the city decided to take Rabbi Yitzchak on as the new Rav, the new rabbi of the city, because they didn't have a rabbi for some time. And he was able to sit and study Torah and Paskin Halachas for Yidden, and was very loved by his people. Next story is a story about a chassid of the Holy Baal Tanya. There was a chassid by the name of Reb Zalman, and Reb Zalman, each time before he went out to do business, he would go to the Holy Baal Tanya and get a blessing. And when he came back, he decided that next time I go out, it's for the Rebbe, not for me. And the Holy Baal Tanya appreciated very much, because Baal Tanya had a habit of teaching his chassidim two very important things: about spreading the words of the Baal Shem Tov to people throughout Russia, and B, collecting money for the poor Torah scholars that lived in Israel, that were originally from Russia, but they moved to Eretz Yisrael to do the beautiful mitzvah of living in the land of Israel, and they were always in need of money. So Reb Zalman goes into the Holy Baal Tanya. Baal Tanya says to him, Reb Zalman, today I'm happy you came. I understand that you did some nice business recently, so you have some time to spend, so I want you to go for a couple of weeks to this city and to that town, and to this village, and take along your books so that you could study and you could give over the holy Torah of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh and the beautiful lessons that he taught us. And also, do me a favor, collect a lot of money for the people in Israel because they're starving and they're all day long, they're busy with worshiping Hashem, davening and learning and doing their own mitzvahs. And Reb Zalman said, okay, I'll be happy to go. And before he leaves, the Baal Tanya says, wait a minute. I want you to remember this. Wherever you go, don't ever spend a night in an apartment or in a hotel room that the door to the apartment is on the east side, on the east wall of the apartment. Interesting. But Reb Zalman knew that the Rebbe doesn't just talk for no reason. There must be a reason behind it. And says goodbye. The Rebbe blesses him. And him and his coachman go traveling on the way to their first town. And the next town, and the next town. When they finally finished most of what they had to do, they were traveling, and it was past midnight, and somehow they got lost. Coachman didn't know where they are. Reb Zalman didn't know where they were. And they decided that they'll travel a little bit more. Maybe they'll find someplace to go. And sure enough, they see a little house with the light is still on it. And here it's after midnight. They knock on the door. The man answers the door. And says, oh, Shalom Aleichem. They felt very welcome. They come inside. Reb Zalman, who hadn't davened yet, who hadn't prayed yet the evening service, went to wash his hands and to get ready to daven. He puts on his gartel, and he says to the host, "Sir, which way is east? Because I have to pray." And he points to that way, and Reb Zalman says, "What? That's east, and there's a door on that wall?" He thinks to himself, and he calls his coachman in and says, "Get all our stuff together. We're getting out of here as fast as we can." Poor coachman was knocked out. He's been traveling all day here. It's past midnight. He thought he'll get a night's sleep. But whatever the boss says, and they start piling their stuff together and ready to go out. When the host comes and says, my guests come in here, but they never leave. They were scared out of their wits, and they could hear him bolting up the door so that they can't go out. He was outside, came back to another room in back of where they were. They were petrified. Reb Zalman davens. And the whole night, him and his coachman were saying psalms, praying to Hashem, please let us get out of here alive. And towards morning, these gangsters come, and you can hear them laughing to each other. Okay, let's take care of these new birds we got. And they could hear the owner say, yeah, we got some rare birds, worth a lot. I even heard the money clanging in the boxes. And Reb Zalman doesn't know what to do, so he prays even harder, him and his coachman. A little later, they hear the owner of the place, the host, coming towards their room quietly. He opens up the door, and they thought this is the end. And he says to Reb Zalman and his coachman, fast, get out of here, take all your stuff, because I know that your Rebbe, your great Rebbe, is going to take care of you. And I don't start up with people that are Chassidim of Rebbes, because I know the great power and the hidden secrets that they live with, the Rebbes, and all the secrets and all the Kabbalah that they know. And I just don't want to start up with your Rebbe. So please escape as fast as you can. And he escaped as fast as he can, together with his coachman. And of course, when he came back, he went into the Holy Baal Tanya and told him the whole story. And the Baal Tanya, before he could even finish the story, he said, I was up all night just for you. And this host, this gangster, whatever he was, also gave him 50 rubles to give to the Baal Tanya. And he gives it to the Baal Tanya. The Baal Tanya didn't want to take it, but he said, okay, take the 50 rubles and put it in that crack in the wall. Okay, years go by, and one day a poor man comes to the Baal Tanya, knocks on the door, and the helper, the Gabbai, the Shamus, answers the door. Says, yes, what do you want? He says, I want to go in to see the Rebbe. Baal Tanya says, he cannot see me. Takes out the 50 rubles and gives it to him and says, give it to him. Anyway, that's the second story. Third story. The Heilige Rabbi Yosef Moshe, the son of the Abder Rav, was a chassid of the Chassidic Stories. He was a big businessman, also a very holy person, also a big scholar. And so he used to do a lot of traveling. But he would never go anywhere without the permission and the blessing of the Heilige Chassidic Stories. So one day he comes into the Chassidic Stories and they speak about everything in the world, and at the end he says, Rebbe, I'm going on a big business trip this week. Of course I want a bracha, a blessing. And the Rebbe says to him, I'll give you my blessing and it should be very successful, but I want you to remember, I want to ask you one thing. You do so much traveling because of your businesses. I know that you study all the time on the coach and then wherever you go. I know you're busy with giving charity. What happens if while you're traveling, a crippled man asks you for a ride on the highway? So he says, Rebbe, anyone that asks me for a ride, I told my people, I told my coachman to not only let the person come on the coach, but first let's take the person where he's going. That's an extra mitzvah. And the Rebbe says, that's very pious of you, that's very special. Of course, you're the son of the Abder Rav, you've seen great things by your father, very good upbringing. But my question to you now is, what in case you're on a highway and there's a crippled person going, a lame person? Would you pick him up also? And he thinks to himself, and he says, Rebbe, if I do it for a healthy person, for sure, it's a big rachmanis, it's a big pity, someone lame. And the Rebbe says to him, and I say just the opposite. If it's a healthy person, it's a big mitzvah to pick him up. Because a healthy person would be able to make the way where he has to go with his healthy feet. So you're doing a mitzvah by helping him, and in fact, you even take him to his place. But a lame person, a crippled person on a highway, what's he doing on the highway? And what if somebody doesn't pick him up? So maybe he's not really crippled, and maybe it's a fake. So I say, don't pick up a crippled person on a highway. And have a safe trip. And as they're traveling, they go, and all of a sudden, he falls asleep, Rabbi Yosef Moshe, and all of a sudden he hears a tumult going on. And he asks what's going on, and they tell him, the coachman tells him, there's this lame pauper running, he has 2 canes, he wants a ride, so I'm going to stop him like you always tell us. He says, no, don't stop him. In fact, go faster. And he wallops the horses, and they go faster, and they can hear this guy screaming and cursing. And he takes both of his canes and throws them at the wagon. Thank God nothing happened to the wagon, just got a little, the cover got a little broken. But sure enough, they learned their lesson, and thanks to the Rebbe that they lived happily ever after. That'll be it for now.